Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. We are back. We took a bit of a break. DABCC Radio is an old beast, and I'm an old man, and I wanted to take a little bit of a break and save you guys from all these episodes. But what was the shame thing is we had one in the hopper right before we took a little bit of a break, and it's this episode, and it's a great episode, and it's with some fine folks from a company called A2U. And Dan and Cliff, and I apologize so much, both more to you guys than to them, because they such a great episode. So we're going to share that with you today. We're going to talk about their views and what they're seeing within the EUC space, and it's valid today as when we recorded this towards the end of last year. And what else do I say? So with no further ado, let's just dive into this. I really enjoyed recording this, and let's do it. Okay, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me, and I quite look forward to this. I love having guys like you on because it's a different conversation than the ISV conversation, and there's nothing wrong with the ISV conversation. I learned so much from them, but I learn a lot from what you guys are doing and your experience dealing with customers and solving problems on a daily basis. So I'm really excited about this conversation. So that being said, let's dive into it. And for the first question, as always, we ask, who are you? So let's take Dan first. Dan, who are you, and what do you do over at A2U?
Hey, Doug. Yes, I'm the CEO and founder of A2U. And I guess wearing a lot of different hats. I grew up as an engineer, focused on Citrix for companies like FedEx and UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and spent some time as a sales engineer at Citrix, and started a hosting company and now a consulting company several years ago, and really focused on end user computing and how to make customers more efficient for their business.
That's awesome. Hey, Dan, what's the A2U stand for?
So applications to you. When we first started A2U, we were hosting applications for small, medium businesses. So that's where the applications to you came from. And we've shortened that to A2U as we've become more and more spread out from a geography perspective. We're in 9 states today. So whenever people come to our booth and see applications to you, they always thought we were programmers. So we shortened that up to A2U and make it a little bit more catchy.
Makes sense. That's might be one of the number one questions you receive. I always get, what's DABCC stand for? Like, oh my gosh, that's such a long story. Stands for Douglas Upper Brown Computer Company. So anyway, so Cliff, who are you and what do you do over at A2U?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I'm Cliff Miller. I'm the CTO over here at A2U. Like Dan, I have an engineering background. I didn't start a company, but I have. I've worked with Dan for a number of years. Been with Citrix, the technology, for most of my career, dating back to the MetaFrame XP days. So I've come up in that and really spent the last 4 years with A2U, developing, honing my skills across a wide variety of technologies. In the past year, I've been put in the position of over service delivery as the CTO.
Very cool, very cool. You had me at MetaFrame XP, so yeah, you had me at MetaFrame. I love hearing that word. I really, honestly do. MetaFrame is such a cool word. So that being said, hey Dan, I'll ask you this question. You mentioned a little bit about A2U and how you got founded and the original goal, or the early days, right? But who is A2U and what do you guys do? Can you give us maybe a more verbose answer to that
Yeah, I would love to. So essentially, when I started Applications 2U, it was all about hosting those applications for small, medium businesses, as well as taking software vendors and web enabling their applications. And so I had that going since 2003. And then probably about 6 years ago now, got into running that full time, was asked to do a lot of consulting work. So I was pulled back into UPMC as a consultant, refocused on their Citrix farm, got things fixed for them. There were some issues there, and solidified that environment. And when people heard that I was out there doing consulting, more and more customers were coming to me and saying, "Hey, I heard you're doing consulting." My answer was always, "I'm actually trying to focus on this cloud hosting side." And they would always say, "Well, I'd like to bring you in and we'd like you to fix this problem." And I would say yes. And really, we grew from there. And what I realized was I had more work consulting than I had time to deliver. And if I was going to turn it into a consulting company versus being a consultant, what was going to be instrumental to that was to keeping the reason people were looking for me to do it, and that is to hire the best of the best. So from A2U, we have adopted many other technologies since starting the consulting side. We have Cisco, we have in many different areas, Microsoft, et cetera. And each time that we've gone into that, it's been by acquiring or hiring the best talent in those areas. And so that's really, I'd say, the focus on A2U is to bring together the true consultant technologists to go on site and deliver that experience of having that 10, 15, or in my case, 20 years of experience in those technologies and going in there and making a difference for the customer. And then I guess the other thing I would add in is that, from working at UPMC, for example, one of the differences I made while I was there is by going out and rounding, taking a look at the workflow of the nurses and the doctors, and really just understanding what do they need this technology for. Too oftentimes we stay in, as we call it, the ivory tower, and we take a support ticket or a project request and we handle that as it came to us. And getting out there and understanding what we were doing and how it applied to the actual user really made a difference, where we can go and say, you know what, I know you're asking for this, but there's a better way that would meet your workflow a lot more efficiently. And so we would end up creating environments that are different than what the user requested, because the users don't always know what options are out there from a technology perspective. And so one of our strengths is always to come in as a trusted advisor, just like we did when we worked over at UPMC, worked at FedEx. We come in as part of the team, look at how we can make a difference for the business. We're all, Doug, you can relate to this. We're all technology geeks. We love to play with the toys and turn some knobs and look at what this can do. But at the end of the day, it's not about toys, right? It's about tools. Yeah. So understanding how those can be used in those workplaces, and it's really great to put in the lab and play with something, but is it worth spending the money on it? Is it worth, in a lot of ways, sometimes, disrupting the business to implement that new toy that's not really going to become a tool for that user or that customer?
I love how you say that, because I always say, I like using the word toy. If people, when I'm trying to explain to people what I do for a living and they don't have any comprehension of what I do for a living, I usually say I play with toys for a living. But really, I think of it as toys are what engineers play with, and consultants consult, right? And there's not, I'm not saying one's better than the other, and usually a consultant is an engineer, right? But almost always. But it's a different level of engagement with the customer, right? Where you're truly looking at it. You don't walk into the customer and say, okay, where's your server room? You walk into your customer and say, hey, where's the conference room so we can sit down and talk about this for a while? What is your problem? How do we, am I really here for the right solution, right? And I think that's what truly separates the men from the boys, and the winners from the I won't say losers, but the A players from the B players, right? I love that you said that, and I think that's why you're successful.
Yeah.
Too.
And it's something I realized early on is that, coming at it as an engineer that fell into owning a company, realistically, we go in there to solve problems, not to try to push a specific product or to try to see how many zeros we can get added to that quote. one of my first clients I walked into was a hospital up northern Pennsylvania, and they had a proposal on the table from another VAR for $1 million worth of hardware for them to do virtual desktops to 1,000 desktops. And I sat down with them and said, first of all, like, what are we even doing, right? You know, I'm definitely into virtual desktops, and I think it's the right technologies, but again, it has to have that business play. And if you're putting $1 million on 1,000 desktops, and then you add in all the other software costs and implementation and things like that, I think you're spending $2,000 per machine to convert it. Where's your ROI? What's going on? And we took a look at it and we redefined it, and we were able to deliver the virtual desktop experience in a better way. And it was only $200,000 to do that. So now we had an easy ROI. The deal was there on the table, and granted, I could have gone in there and sold that for $500,000. It still would have been half the price of what they had on the table. But it's about doing what's right for the business and the customer.
You got it. You got it. So I have to ask you along those lines, what's sort of your take on IT today? We hear a lot about digital transformation, and it's just absolutely huge. I mean, at IGEL, we talk about digital transformation all the time. And so, what have you seen firsthand? What is your take on IT today? Where are we?
Yeah, Doug, Cliff, let me try to answer that. What we're seeing in IT today, I mean, in the past few years, we hear the word cloud a lot, and feel like that didn't redefine a few times, but maybe I think it's pretty clear. The cloud is no longer a fog, but more understood, and there's a lot of clouds out there, and it's not a question of are we moving to the cloud? It's which cloud or clouds are people going to be in, and what makes sense for the company, for the businesses, for our customers. So we're having those conversations. We see a lot of people making some sort of move to the cloud, but I think the term hybrid cloud has come out of that, because a lot of people want to hold on to IT as it was. There's that resistance to change. There's also that large investment that we made in our data centers. We want to keep that. That's going to have a life cycle. That investment. But as things roll off, I mean, I think we're seeing more things get put into the cloud, whether it's like a Citrix cloud, like a managed service that's cloud hosted, or applications that are cloud based, or even web apps. A lot of things are moving that way to be something as a service. We're seeing a lot of that, and navigating that with the customers, helping them understand what are the options, just the difference between how they used to pay for it, and how the new structures are, and that's all part of that, working with the customer and just navigating the IT today. Like it's a lot of technology and bells and whistles, and we're talking about that turning the knobs, like what can this do in when it's in the cloud versus on-prem, or what can it do, what do I need to be aware of, as well as on the business side of it, what does that look like for putting a quote together? How do we pay for it? It's different. You're not owning that anymore, because you're paying for a service.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead, Dan.
I think from a definition too on digital transformation, I think it's Cliff saying, cloud started off, I like that, a little foggy, and really it becomes a term gets defined, a new industry process is there, and people start looking at what is this, and a lot of the toys get behind it, as we were talking about before, is what is digital transformation, or in the case of cloud, what is cloud? I like the joke that's like, I have a cloud network cable for you, and really it's just a network cable, right? So understanding what this really means and how this can be of value, why is it different, why is it worth defining, I think that's important. And for me, digital transformation is something that, we've really had that focus. We've talked a little bit about this already here, but it's about getting the focus back to the business, right? So leveraging things like cloud to get rid of the day-to-day support the day-to-day management things that the IT teams of these clients are currently dealing with, and instead having them focus on the technology in a way of how does this relate to the business, or what business processes can we introduce new IT and workflows and utilities to be able to enhance those business processes. So to me, that's where the digital transformation comes into play, which is something of a mindset that we've had for quite a while. So we're really happy to see that as getting the traction that it's getting, right? I mean, same thing with cloud, with applications to you in 2003. There was no cloud definition for that, right? It was what we were doing. We were moving things into our data centers. We were managing and publishing applications and taking IT away from the customer. And then later on, the term cloud was formed, and it really defined what we were doing. And so I see digital transformation as the same thing, right? It's kind of adding some validity to the directions that we were going down, where we're not focused on trying to sell you solid state disk because it's faster and it's the new thing, but instead we're focused on how can we make that workflow better? How can we ensure that the business is getting the data they need to make the proper decisions?
I love it. I love it. And when I think of the cloud, I think of, cloud services, as Cliff said, because the cloud itself is just a road, right? And it's like you mentioned, just a cable, just a cable, it's just a road, it's just a highway. And without the services, it's nothing. And Dan, we did try this many, many years ago. I don't think the technology was ready for it yet, right? It wasn't, it was in the early days. You couldn't do everything. You couldn't really give the user experience that we can give today, right? Today with, you can do a local user experience through the remoting protocol. It still blows my mind. So I think it's the right time, right place to start, and that's why you're seeing all these cloud services, and HTML5 is here, and, and beyond. And it's just a wonderful. So, Citrix has been, I mentioned just, doing this. You mentioned doing this for a long time in the sense of, trying this in these early days. So how do you think Citrix, and, I got to throw in IGEL there because I'm a little bit biased, right? Maybe IGEL, it helps you achieve this, digital transformation, helps you customers achieve their goals today. Where do you see that fitting in?
Yeah, Doug, we see, a lot of our clients are looking to us having those conversations around workflows and endpoint management and maybe in security. So one of the big benefits there with the IGEL is it's a Linux desktop. It's a hardened appliance on the endpoint, and it's very, and the simplicity too. It's easy to manage. You can manage thousands of machines with really a single admin, and whether those are purchased devices through IGEL or converted through the UD Pockets, or just using the UDC tool and turning reusing a machine that normally would have been replaced on a 3-year, 5-year life cycle, gets some new hardware in there. For just a small license cost, we can convert that and manage that with all the same set of tools that we with the same engineer. That message really resonates with the customers, and just really IGEL living up to that promise that it is simple, it is easy, you get a consistent experience. They work with all with Citrix and the major vendors there to. So we can talk about what are the options to deliver your solution. What's the best way to we can get people they can log into the machine. We can have a generic login page, or integrate with badge readers and things like that. So we have those conversations. We can walk them through the options. We can demo that with the IGEL products, and set that up in a day using their existing infrastructure, and kind of walk a customer through what are their options. And they really appreciate that, and sometimes you see that their eyes widen as we kind of reveal these things to them, where they maybe didn't even know they had this pain point, or to the extent that they do. How do they leverage the technology that they have or have access to with Citrix and with IGEL to marry a solution together?
Yeah, please, Dan.
Just to expand on that, I also want to say is that, while we can use these tools to really better the user experience, some of those are in two ways. One is we can, using IGEL, as Cliff mentioned, to turn that endpoint into an appliance. I do like that, and essentially, streamlining, the support of those. It's going to do two things. One is it's going to make sure that my experience is the same as a user, no matter where I go. I'm not going to have a problem where I go up to a machine and it's going to be different. And different means support issues. Different means user productivity issues, things like that. So I can really streamline that. And that does, obviously it has the value to the user, but it also has a big value to where the business is focused from an IT perspective. So if we're focused in running around and managing PCs and fixing issues because one of every 100 machines is having a problem every day and things like that, then us as an IT department, if you will, in a company, we're not focused on the digital transformation side. We're not focused on how to make that experience better. We're focused on continuing to try to make this experience that we already have work. And that's where we really want to try to continue to move. Honestly, as we talked about a little bit before, Doug, I was at a customer site in the South this week, and we were talking about these exact challenges where they even have their teams from the server desktop support side running through hospital and checking on the machines daily because they're having problems. And if they can find the problem and then reboot the machine, then they're able to get it out of the way of the user, so the user walks up and they don't have that issue. And so that's where they're spending their time in IT, is going around trying to make sure that the user is not going to have an issue, instead of looking at ways that the user can be more productive or things that are thinking outside of the box. So that's my experience, and where I've had a lot of customer success in transforming that environment into I'll say is using Cliff's word there, a simple experience, something that can be easily managed, something that's simple for the user and allows us to go concentrate now on other things.
I love it. I love what Cliff said about the eyes widening, because I get a lot of my friends say, what's it like at IGEL, especially in the early days when I joined, hey, what are you doing at IGEL? It's a thin client company. I was like, no, first of all, it's not. Second of all, what's really neat is walking into a customer that has a preconceived maybe opinion, or they don't know about it. You show it to them and their eyes wide open. Just like, really, you can do this. And it was the same experience I had with Citrix in the early days, because I think there's, oh my. And then you start seeing their brain work, right? And think, oh, wow, we can use this here, 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 and here. Wow, this is great. And then you start talking to them about the dollars, and they're like, wait a second, this is really wonderful. So I love it. That's my favorite. It's always been my favorite part about, moving away from just doing, being an engineer, right? And moving into consulting and moving into evangelizing technology. It's getting people to see a different way of thinking, right? And then they love it. You solve people's problems.
Yeah, I like what you said there about the dollars too, because as an engineer, a lot of times I walk into an environment, and if I go pre-IGEL, right, like our conversations of like, this would be great, we get passionate, we love what we're doing, and we see in environments like, what, if you would put thin clients in here instead of PCs, just rip all these PCs out and put thin clients in, you won't have to do it. And then there's my story I said before about the benefits of moving to the thin client. But then we get pushed into, well, maybe over some period of time, because these PCs are newer and we don't want to just, rip these out and throw them away. We need to continue to use that. So really, that's on to the very first conversations I started to have with IGEL before we really knew the depth of the value was, we hear you can convert a PC. Tell me more about this, because now I don't have to go through that. I don't have to fight the cost issue where I'm going to, put a $500 thin client in place of a machine that I bought a year ago. I can instead say, let's convert that. We'll get more life out of it. It's a lower cost of entry. And then whenever that machine does finally die, we can take a decision and say, do we want to put another computer there and convert it? Or maybe now it's time to buy the thin client when we're ready, and really can fast track to the point where we're managing, as Cliff said, thousands of devices over one engineer, or even a lot of times by a portion of an engineer.
I love it. I love that you said that. That is so darn true. So the portion of an engineer, because it's an automation solution, right? You set up, it's really not management, it's automation. You set up a process, you set up a workflow, and then it just happens. And when you need to change that workflow, which is actually quite rare, maybe an update to an app or something of that nature, then you need to actually touch it. Or if you need to do an upgrade of an OS or something, which is quite, once a quarter, and it's flawless, it works. So anyway.
So
go ahead.
Years ago, Doug, I was at when I was at FedEx, this is probably 15 years ago or whatever. There was a virus, a vulnerability outbreak, and in order to make sure we were protected, everybody had emergency meetings, and we have to go upgrade all of our PCs and apply this security update. And I didn't make any friends with this statement, but while we were in the meeting, I said, "Okay, I'm done." And I just updated 6,000 endpoints because we were running all thin clients and virtual desktops, and the PC support people are looking at me going, "Oh, I've got the next couple weeks to spend running around updating machines." And we're going to push those out. At the time it was SMS. We're going to push those out with SMS, and then we're going to go circle for the ones that didn't work, and playing that game. And so, like I said, we were able to within a few clicks and updating the single image, we were able to get all of those machines updated. And that's what I say, it's not even a matter of a full engineer, right? I'm able to do those things within minutes.
Yeah, you got it. It's awesome. So, Citrix has been pushing Citrix Cloud quite heavily, and rightfully so. When do you see this playing? What kind of conversations are you having around Citrix Cloud with your customers? What are they having with you?
Yeah, Doug, I think one of the most interesting things for the customers there, as being a managed service, they don't have to maintain that infrastructure. We're not worried about SQL licensing, SQL servers, HA, and ongoing system updates. They're always getting current release. They're getting the benefits of the platinum features, the premium features from Citrix, and we can have those conversations with you're entitled to this, you can do that, and really there are a lot of people that when we're talking that conversation, if they don't have Citrix, like they don't have that expertise, that can be hard to find in house for IT departments. I've seen desktop guys be turned into Citrix engineers. A SQL engineer was turned. One of our customers is now the managing Citrix as his colleague moved on, and now he's owning Citrix. And really he's doing his best, but he just doesn't have that background or that experience. And so this conversation plays nicely with that. People that we're talking to like that, where they didn't grow up with Citrix. They can't spell metaframe, and so it just takes that off their hands. I mean, and like I said, it keeps it current, keeps them where they want to be. They want to be able to focus on other aspects of the business. Even going back to what we were saying, like part of an engineer. Those more difficult tasks, more challenging, more complicated. They're offloaded to Citrix, to someone else. So that they can just focus on what they know, and they know their business, they know their users. What are their applications? There's always going to be that workload and that time spent within that support area, and that's where they can focus their time and not just have systems either have downtime because of a failed update or just have issues where they don't have support anymore because they let the system let it go. They didn't update it for several years because they didn't know how, or they were afraid or didn't have the right partner.
Doug, I'd like to add a couple things there as well. So one of the pieces is we're talking about Citrix Cloud right now, but I find that a lot of people don't understand what Citrix Cloud is, and I was one of those. Whenever I first had Citrix announced to us that they were going to go with Citrix Cloud, and it was a new thing, and really the first thought that came to my head is that we were going to put user session host servers up in the cloud, and that opens up challenges if you have a lot of data in your own data center and you want the users next to the data and things like that. So just wanted to really define that Citrix Cloud allows you to still put those users wherever they belong. So if you are in a scenario right now where you have a lot of Azure or AWS equipment, you can put that user server there, or if you have it in your own data center, you can leave that there. It doesn't change that. This is really the control plane. So it's the Citrix backend infrastructure, if you will, that goes into the Citrix cloud and does not prohibit the company from putting it wherever is best for the user. So it gets rid of those items that Cliff talked about. And just kind of to runway into that is that he mentioned SQL. Those are things that I find a lot of times that are not thought of. People are thinking, okay, I'm going to put my NetScaler gateway in the cloud, or I'm going to put my delivery controller or storefront in the cloud. But behind that is the rest of that infrastructure as well. We're not worried about what virtual environment that those machines are running on. We're not worried about the SQL that it's connected to. In a smaller company, that might be, we don't have the SQL experience to maintain that. In a larger company, that's a different team. And are they optimizing SQL the way Citrix would want that optimized? And those things create issues in environments, and environments have downtime or problems that occur because of the infrastructure that really is not related to Citrix, but Citrix is requiring. And moving into that cloud allows that entire footprint, if you will, to be placed back in Citrix's hands. Think of it a Exchange, right? Like if you go to Exchange Online, you go cloud for Microsoft. You're moving the Exchange server and all that infrastructure back into Microsoft and making that the as a service. But the Outlook client and all of that, those components, those still stay on the user's endpoint, and you can still put that wherever that belongs.
I love that you said that, because you are right. People think of it as a sort of a pure play DaaS solution, right? And it's not. This is why I said rightfully so, because I love what Citrix is doing. It's sort of the best of both worlds, right? And I love that you said too is, where the data is, because I think that's the most important. I do this in almost every session I do when I'm out speaking, is I explain, hey, why did we deploy Citrix in the first place? We did it so that we could put the app where the data is, so we can open this up over our, really crappy bandwidth we had back in those days, right? And it's still that, it's granted we have great bandwidth, but you still need those two together. And I think Citrix has the best solution for that right now, in the sense that you can put the control plane up in the cloud and the workers down local, right? And it's I love it. I thank you so much for answering it that way and clarifying for a lot of people that might not know what it is, right? Or think of it indifferently. So yeah, it's great answer. What about Microsoft Virtual Desktop? You know what? A few weeks ago, a month ago, I don't know how long ago. Time flies so quick. Microsoft announced their Virtual Desktop, which is a pure play DaaS solution, I think. What do you think of that? Have you had time to digest any of this, or look at it?
Yeah, I've been going through that. Cliff and I actually did a podcast around some of the things that were out there. There was some information that wasn't quite on the mark, as far as I know. There was Brian Madden, for example, had a blog talking about VDI being the only way to go, and we're going to see it go away in 2019 server. And we did a lot of discussions around that there, from what is Microsoft doing with that platform and where is this headed. And then, as you mentioned, now the desktop as a service. But coming from having the side of our business that did desktop as a service and application hosting, I'd say that's just a vehicle of delivery. That's not the infrastructure. It's not the managed services part of it, if you will. And that's something important to understand when you're looking at any cloud solution. What exactly are you looking for? What makes sense? Things like Exchange Online, things like Citrix Cloud, where you're taking the back-end infrastructure and not having to think about it, but still being able to manage the Outlook in the Exchange scenario, or the user experience on local scenario. Those don't go away, right? So the way I see it is, if I did desktop as a service in our business, as here's a desktop, now you can do what you need to with it. It doesn't remove any of the support that comes along with that. And so I'm going to put a desktop in the Microsoft cloud, and my data is in my data center. Going back to that message, right? What do we want to do that for? I would never want to have the desktop be removed from my infrastructure. I would want to have that experience always as close to the data, as you mentioned, both from a scenario where we have to worry about performance, But also even in a scenario where we have to worry about security, let's keep the data as close as we can. Let's not have that leaving the environment. So that's what my biggest concern on that is in that area. People always used to ask me, are you worried that the big players like Microsoft or even AWS are going to get into the desktop space and now your cloud desktop as a service business will go away? It's not really, because at the end of the day, I don't see Microsoft supporting, for example, QuickBooks running on the desktop, or all the other pieces of the infrastructure. Are they going to support SAP running on that? Are they going to cover that? So really, it's the same as getting any VM, I guess, from a cloud provider such as Microsoft or AWS. It's the same thing where we're talking about it's a VM in the cloud, most likely going to cost a pretty penny, and you're still going to be stuck doing all of the heavy lifting from a support perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I look at it I agree with you, but I also look at it in the sense of I'm happy they did it, because it's sort of not that we need legitimizing, but it's like hey, now this is sort of somewhat been blessed by Microsoft, right? This idea, that it's not to be. They've never really done that before. They always let us do it. They always let Citrix do it. They always let, it's just sort of that, that guy out there in the corner that they're like, yeah, it's a great thing. Give us more licenses. Every time they buy it, we make money. But now that they jump in, full body, right? I think it's a sign that this is the future more than anything else. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. The validity side, just like I said, with digital transformation helping us solidify what we're doing and cloud solidifying what we were doing. I do agree there's never a time where it's a negative to see that kind of thing happen. So going forward. Now, one of the questions that is yet to be defined that we still want to understand really is going to come back to that licensing and pricing question, right? So Microsoft jumps into this. What are they going to change when it comes to licensing and options for where we're going to deliver the desktop? But a little bit early. There's not a lot of information out there to get too deep into that, but it's something just to be aware of and watch as it goes forward.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft, how does Microsoft kill a company, right? They embrace, extend, bundle, and they make the price low, right? And this is, they did it with Office, Office 365, which was originally just sort of Exchange. And then they started bringing in all the Office products, and now Teams, and they're just and it's one price. It's affordable. It's everywhere, right? It's not just on Microsoft products, but it's runs perfectly on my Mac. And I think their virtual desktop solution is going to be the same thing, right? They added Windows 7 support to it, or Windows 7 support as part of the sort of offering, from what I'm hearing. And this is the piece that somewhat, I wouldn't say scares me. But they could really, a customer could say, hey, you know what, it might not be as good as this here, but it's really affordable. And that's always been Microsoft's meal ticket. That's how they destroyed Novell, right? So, and
I think
nowadays they can do that. Please.
I think the area with the price, Doug, that I'm waiting to see is one of the ways that we're able to keep the costs down today is by utilizing RDS and shared server to be able to deliver those desktops. And so we're looking at something where Microsoft is heading down, as you said, like Windows 7, Windows 10 virtual desktop platform. There's been a lot of buzz out there about Windows 10 having multi-session. But if Windows 10 has multi-session, are we looking at something where Microsoft prices that as an RDS license, or is it something that Microsoft is pricing as a VDI license? And cloud is different. We're going to have to wait to see what those prices look like and where they're compared to. But today, for example, if I go into a client and we talk about virtual desktops, if I go VDI, Microsoft's list price is roughly about $100 per year to do VDI, whereas RDS is about $100 perpetual. So if you look at 3 years, it's almost 3 times as expensive to go with a VDI scenario. So while we can make something they can make it less expensive, for example, than VDI, is it going to be less expensive, or is it going to be enabling the same ROI or the same price points as we see today from a hosted shared model?
Yeah. No, you got a good point. I 100%. I can't argue with that. Now, I will say I've always pulled I'm an engineer. I don't know pricing. Carl. I do understand pricing. It's just when I don't feel like talking about it's what I say.
Yeah. Well, I love from the capacity side, if we have multi-session and if they allow that would be where the power would come in there, right? Because we know that if I have 1,000 desktops and I run VDI, I have to have 1,000 VMs. But if I have 1,000 desktops and I run XenApp, I might be able to do that with 100 VMs. So that's even a high number, right? So that's where I just think it's having multi-session, if that's really going to be a release, that all the buzz is out there's so much of it, then I'd be surprised if it wasn't coming. But if they're enabling that as part of their DaaS solution, I think that would be a lot more powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you know what the thing is, and I think you said it right. We don't know yet, but we just don't know. So it's something to definitely keep an eye on, and it's pretty cool. At the same time, what is it? We don't know. So on that note, it maybe leads me to my the last question I wanted to ask you guys, which is, the $10 million question, right? Is sort of, what do you see the future of EUC, right? Where do you think we're going with this stuff? What's the next step, or, what's the pie in the sky? I bet you probably get this question quite often from customers, right?
One of the things there, Doug, is it depends on the context. I mean, where are we at today? Well, with our customers, we're enabling a lot of these virtual desktops, thin client computing. We're doing that today, right? That's what we're doing. Multiple projects going on at a time, converting people from thick clients to thin clients and virtual desktops and all of that. So in our space, we see virtual desktop as almost a norm. But that being said, I don't know that I'd be very curious. I'm sure there's some numbers out there. What percentage of the desktops are thin client today? What percentage of desktops today are running virtual desktops? And so I think it really is an accelerator for that. It's going to one is, I think, the Microsoft getting into the DaaS space is going to, if nothing else, create a lot more buzz, a lot more traction. People are going to be taking a heavier look at it. And we should be able to see what we did when VDI was the new thing, see a lot more around that, a lot more discussions happening. And if Microsoft comes out with something that is bulletproof and great for everybody, right, which we don't know, so it's tough to make that call. But we're going to see a lot of people moving to that. But even if it's something that, let's say, 10% of the desktops that are out there could be moved into a Microsoft desktop, it's still going to enable us and have us having these conversations in 80% of those companies to talk about that strategy and where that lies. And so it could come up with a lot of different options with anything from on-prem virtual desktop delivery to Citrix Cloud to whatever, right? So I think that's really what I'm going for, is that it's going to have we're going to have a lot more conversations with a lot more people around this as we move forward. I'll say one of the things that we always talk about is our challenge is getting those discussions kicked off, right? Getting in front of the people that would make those decisions or would think strategically about what the right solution is for the desktop. And two things around that. One is, in IT, we're often focused on the data center, but the cost on the endpoints often exceeds the cost when you look at a per user cost in technology. So what is the cost? We don't look at it because it's a $700 PC. It's not a big deal, but the $700 PC, the soft cost, the software associated to it, the management, everything else, those costs end up coming up more so than the data center. So when we're able to have those conversations, we're really talking to clients about, would you like to do something where you can deliver a better experience for your users for less money? And that's not a very difficult conversation to have. So as I mentioned, really just having Microsoft DaaS will open up more conversations like that, whether they end up with Microsoft DaaS being the solution, or if they end up with a separate solution. It's still a great conversation to have to figure out how they can be strategic on the end point.
I love it. I mean, I have nothing to add, I guess. I'll leave it at what you guys said. I love it. I like the way you phrased that. And you didn't say, hey, there's going to be more toys, right? Of course there's going to be more toys. So I like your approach. And I think it, if anything, it brought us, back to the beginning of the conversation. At A2U, you guys aren't don't care about the toy. I mean, you care about the toys, but that's not why you're there. You're there to save people money, create better solutions, and things like that. I love it. Absolutely love it. Well done. So on that note, you mentioned you guys did a podcast. You guys have. Can you talk maybe about, if somebody wants to learn more about you, about A2U, about things you guys are doing? Are there places they can go? Are there things they, podcasts, what have you? I'll leave it. Yeah.
Yeah, we keep very active around our communication. We have on our website, we have blogs that we're consistently keeping updated and posting information as it comes out. We also are very active on social media. So if they want to follow A2U or Applications to You on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, those are all great ways to just keep abreast of what's happening in technology and what's going on there as well as here.
That's great. And what's the A2U.com or?
A2U.net.
.net. Love it. Okay, guys. I think we're done. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And if there's anything we left out, I'll give you the last word, or you can just say, bye to everybody. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time to listen and giving us a little bit of the stage here. And thank you, Doug, so much for having us as a guest on your podcast.
Well, thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Doug. Appreciate having us on.
Yeah, and again, thank you a lot. I really enjoyed it. It was a refreshing conversation. I'll say that. Well, I'll say a lot of things, but I'll phrase it that way. It's very refreshing, and I love that.
If anybody has anything too that they would like to provide for feedback from the podcast, we have an email address, feedback@a2u.net. So we'd love to hear from you guys, and maybe that'll be part of our next blog.
That's wonderful. Yeah, please message these guys. Tell them they were wrong. So, or say,
bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. Exactly. He's a big guy too, so he will take you down.
Great talking to you, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll call it a show. So thanks so much.
Hey, have a good one.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guests for today. The Dan and company from A2U, great guys, great company. And, one of the things I love about IGEL is I get to talk to customers and what have you, and the feedback I've heard from their customers has just been superior. So imagine great people, great culture, super smart guys, and happy customers, and you got a recipe for success. And I think that's what you've seen out of these guys. Really, really, truly great people. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We have taken a long time between episodes. I apologize for that. Believe it or not, DABCC is now 20 years old. So in January, DABCC turned 20. And after doing something for so long, you want to take a little bit of a break from it. And that's what I did. So I'm quite busy at IGEL. I love what I'm doing at IGEL. I hope you guys check out what we're doing at IGEL. We talked about IGEL today with Dan and company. And what do I say? IGEL leaves me speechless. I joined the company to have some fun and experience some growth again and some neat stuff and work with some great people. And I didn't imagine there would be such great people, such amazing groups, growth, such amazing technology to an exponential. So really neat stuff. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll go ahead and call this an episode. Please stay tuned. There's going to be more and more. On that note, thank you so much for listening to the ABCC.
CC?
DABC.
Say it again. DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again? DABCC.
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.